Chairman Alexander and Ranking Member Murray and members of the committee, thank you for this opportunity to speak. Look, a foundation of our democracy is that all children deserve access to quality public education regardless of their personal circumstances. I spent yesterday morning at Sauhegan High School in Amherst, New Hampshire, where I saw a superb public school helping students engage in project-based 21st century learning and trying out our pilot PACE assessment process, a groundbreaking national leadership process and competency-based assessment. The job of our country's Secretary of Education is to uphold that commitment to a public school system that works for everybody. And in my view, Mrs. DeVos has shown herself to be completely unqualified to do that. That's because she has relatively little, if any, true experience with public education. It is because of the lingering issues around conflicts of interest that still exist because we don't clearly understand what her family trusts will remain invested in. Will they continue to remain invested, for instance, in for-profit private institutions that would get vouchers that she champions? Her willingness to spend taxpayer dollars on unaccountable private schools, taxpayer dollars on religious education, which in my state would violate the Constitution, is also deeply concerning. I do not question her philanthropy. For hundreds of years, philanthropists have established private schools and offered scholarships to give full rides to students who qualify for their schools and can't afford to go. My issue is her willingness to take taxpayer dollars and spend them with no accountability on experiments, leaving out children whose families don't have the resources to make up the difference between the voucher and the full tuition, or leaving behind the kids who, like my son, wouldn't be able to access one of these voucher schools because they don't have the complex capacity to handle a complex, bright student who happens to have extraordinary physical challenges. It is also Mrs. DeVos's lack of understanding about the impact that her voucher programs have had on students with disabilities that deeply concern me. The fact that she didn't seem to know that at least one of those voucher programs made students with disabilities sign away their rights before they could get a voucher. And then guess what? If they arrived at the private school that might have been marketed to them heavily by a for-profit entity and found that that school didn't have the resources that by law every student with disabilities in this country is supposed to be able to access, they had signed away their rights. And if that school didn't work for them, they then had to go back to a public school and the money wasn't returned with them. It is her lack of understanding about the way her ideology really impacts children in this country that concerns me. While I am pleased that Mrs. DeVos clarified that she is no longer confused about whether IDEA is a federal law, she has done nothing to reinforce to me that she would actually enforce the federal law. Her responses to my written questions dance around that issue. The voucher system Mrs. DeVos supports has often hurt individuals who experience disabilities. Many private schools that Mrs. DeVos wishes to push students to lack basic accommodations for those students. And again, she doesn't seem to understand that that's the impact. I come from a state and have been a strong supporter of public charter schools, strategically deployed, accountable public charter schools. They're a critical component to a strong public school system. I come from a state with a not-for-profit online charter school that is a national model. So please do not confuse my opposition or mischaracterize it as somebody who does not support charter schools. I come from a state where teachers, parents, citizens have worked together to develop a teacher assessment system that all parties signed off on. I come from a state where we work together to make sure that every child will have the opportunity to get the kind of education they need to be competitive, successful, competent leaders in the 21st century economy. That's what this debate is about. and with due respect to some of the folks who have expressed their support this morning, this is not about whether we fix failing schools or not. This is not about pitting students who are trapped in a failing school against students who aren't. What we should be committed to, and what I hoped Mrs. DeVos would show competency towards doing, is finding a way to help all of those children. What I know is something that Senator Kaine referenced a few minutes ago. When you develop a school system that works for all children, including, for instance, in my case, children with disabilities, all of a sudden you're finding that you've got people, teachers, educators, who know how to help kids who haven't been diagnosed, who know how to follow individual kids through the school system and adjust the education for them. That is the wonder of a public school system that says every single kid here counts. I know we all are equally committed to that prospect. I just think it's really important for people to understand how vouchers in the form that Mrs. DeVos has supported them have truly impacted all of our kids. And for that reason, I cannot support this nomination and will vote against it. Thank you.